In our first session, after the break here, we are going to hear from two remarkable women about caregiving and care getting, and just how important support is in your cancer journey. Paula Holmes-Rodman is a cultural anthropologist who worked with Pueblo and Navajo women in New Mexico. She is also a caregiver for her big sister, Lindsay, who is living with ovarian cancer as a person with autism. Paula lives on Vancouver Island, where her favorite acts of self-care are hiking and storytelling. Victoria Schutze is a recent transplant to Winnipeg from British Columbia, who is currently experiencing an ovarian cancer recurrence after her initial diagnosis of stage 3C high-grade serous in July 2021. She lives with her very supportive husband, two teenage daughters, dog, and two cats. Now, Paula, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Everyone can hear me okay? Great.
Sounds great.
Good, thanks. So my name is Paula, and my Teal sister is my real sister, Lindsay. So Lindsay was diagnosed in October 2019 with stage 4 ovarian cancer. And after chemo, surgery, more chemo, and now going into her third year of Lynparza, she's feeling really optimistic. But Lindsay's also on the autism spectrum. And so I refer to myself these days as sort of caregiver in chief. So let me explain. Just before Lindsay was diagnosed, we lost our mom. And I migrated directly from being mom's primary caregiver to being my sister's. And then just a year ago, my husband was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. And so I feel like my ground hasn't stopped moving in terms of how I support all these people and love all these people. But some of the more unique challenges I think I face with supporting Lindsay are distance. We live in different provinces, and I noticed that in one of the chats, one of the other women was wanting to support her sister who was in a different province, and also navigating her autism. So there are pragmatic challenges for being a caregiver from a distance, and these are multiplied by the pandemic and an over-reliance on technology. So Lindsay's first appointments and her surgery took place before the pandemic, and I traveled 3 times in 3 months from Vancouver Island to Calgary, arriving home just a week before the world shut down in March 2020, just getting in there right after her surgery. So we actually call ourselves lucky that I was able to be with her for her surgery for that. And since then, we visit as much as possible. We text every day, and we have this wonderful long 2-hour talk every Sunday morning. And I attend all her cancer center appointments. And I put attend in quotation marks because it's by phone or video. Some of these are a little bit sketchy, depending on what cancer center. She goes to Tom Baker, and that is currently located in the basement. The cell service sucks. So yeah, that could be a little bit better supported, let's put it that way. But before this, I prepare all the questions for her, back and forth. I write up the questions, she prints them out, she's a copy for her, I have a copy, I'm on the phone, doctors have a copy, I take notes, I write them all up, I send them back to her. It's a thing. So, but it's a balance, I think, between acting these roles as sort of project manager, what I call Lindsay translator, and information wrangler, and still be her sister. And that's a tough one. But today I'd like to look at a couple of the other roles I have as caregiver that these may resonate with, or maybe hopefully encourage other caregivers out there, and look more closely at how Lindsay and I have navigated this journey. I know the word journey sucks, like I know, but based on the realities of her autism and our distance as well. So roles of the caregiver, I'm looking at 3. First one is caregiver as storyteller. And I'm thinking here of stories of the past, the present, and the future. Caregiver as storyteller of the past. Keep in circulation all those stories that sustain you, sustain your Teal sister. That keep in circulation the pre-cancer stories. All the family memories, the funny ones, the sad ones. Lindsay and I do a lot of, remember when mom said that, or grandma did that. Cancer and caregiving don't happen in a vacuum, obviously. And reminding your loved one and yourself of this continuity and context is in fact a great act of care, not only for her, but also for yourself, as it turns out. And the second is storyteller of the present. So find new ways to listen to and, where appropriate, share her cancer story. Allow her to tell her story in the manner and pace she wishes. And I would also say if she wishes here. So I actually interviewed Lindsay over Zoom, and I got 36 single space pages, which I did not expect. And it was wonderful. We laughed, we cried. It was great. It was just great. And I wanted to interview her as a woman on the autism spectrum. So I talked to her about her diagnosis as a woman who was diagnosed as an adult. And I tried to the best of my ability to recreate that 2-hour Sunday phone call, that chit chat. You know, we were eating, drinking in our pajamas. It was great. And then I transcribed it word for word, gesture for gesture, emotion for emotion, as a testament, not only to her journey, but also to our relationship. And we have favorite parts of this now story, the present story, including just after her surgery, Lindsay was kind of loopy on drugs, and she woke up and she said, "I'm just lying down on the road for a bit, but I'll get up in a minute." And that makes us laugh every time. And I encourage you to find the things that make you laugh in the now story, in the present story. So this now story turned out to be an incredible gift, not only, I think, for Lindsay, because I was able to gift it to her, but now I have it as well. And I've learned more about her in the last, I say that I've learned more about her in the last 3 years than I've known in the 50 plus years she's been as my sister, which makes me both dance with joy and weep as well. But it's kind of amazing. So, storyteller of the future. This could be sharing these hopeful stories about what you hope will happen after cancer, if you think there is an after cancer, or what you hope will happen next. Or it could be, as a caregiver, preparing in your own mind for legacy tales and for what I call keeping the story going. So Lindsay and I have a new niece. We have a younger sister, and she was born last year on Lindsay's birthday. And I really cried that day, I have to say. And on sad days, I do think about what I will tell that little niece about her brave Auntie Lindsay, if Lindsay's not around here to do it herself. So storytelling then can be an act of caregiving, but also care getting. So don't leave the lives of your Teal sisters unstoried. Cancer fractures and breaks the life into before and after and next. Stories knit the bones back together and have a profound healing effect for both of you, I think. Second role, caregiver as a rodeo clown. Okay, look out, here come a whole bunch of cowboy metaphors. Forgive us, we were raised in Calgary. Okay. A rodeo clown, apparently, maybe everybody knows that this is the person dressed in funny things that distracts the bull when the rider gets bucked off, okay? So the caregiver's job as rodeo clown is distraction. You wave your arms and say, "Hey, over here, over here." Well, your cowgirl, your Teal sister, has a moment to dust herself off and find her feet again. So I distract Lindsay, and in fact, we distract each other with very important things: cat videos, in-depth discussions about sports bras and lipsticks, pet antics, travel plans, and thrift store fashion finds. And because of the distance, this is primarily done with phone and text. But Lindsay gets sort of bucked off, not just by elements of her cancer, but also elements of her autism. And this comes in the form of information and sensory overload for her primarily. So being her rodeo clown means being attuned to those physical and verbal cues that she's had enough, that she's done. And then I need to realize at that moment that the greatest act of care that I can do is, in fact, distraction. It's a cat video, actually. That's the greatest act of love sometimes you can do. And then finally, caregiver as hitching post. I warned you about the cowboy metaphors. So the caregiver's role as a hitching post is to be a quiet, unmoving tether. Be grounding, be sturdy, be there. Find strength in simply bearing witness, in holding her hand, even if it's just by phone. So once Lindsay was in the ER for bloating and pain, I'm freaking out in my head. There's recurrence happening. And I can't say this. I'm trying to walk with her, how she's doing. She's not doing well. She is having sensory overload, all the bells and all the busyness of all the nurses. It's too much for her. Well, all my words failed and all my great ideas failed. And maybe yours will as a caregiver. They will probably at some point. I just simply said, I'm here. I'm here. That's all I could do. So learning to sit with that silence and feeling of powerlessness is in fact an essential act of caregiving, I would say. And not only for your Teal sister, but also for yourself. So as a hitching post, what I do is I counter the constant recalibration and recalculation required in a fast-moving cancer journey. And these changes are especially difficult for someone like Lindsay, with processing difficulties, who finds safety and a sense of wellness in routine and predictability. But by being still, quiet, present, there, I not only tether her as an act of care, but in so doing provide grounding for myself and come to the important realization that she's holding my hand too. So Victoria, what have been some of the most important kinds of support that you received and some of the least helpful? I know you've talked to a lot of other Teal sisters as well.
Hi, Paula. Wow, that was really amazing. How do we follow that up, guys?
Oh, you've
So,
got surveys. So.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for the great introduction, and Paula for such a great stage to share with here. So as most of you know, I'm Victoria, diagnosed with stage 3C high-grade serous last year in July. It's been crazy. I was super devastated, and not just for my husband and my kids, but for myself, for every minute of life unlived, for all of the fear that I have that I'll never do those things that I wanted to do. So I had 9 rounds of chemo, full hysterectomy, all the extras except a tummy tuck, and I'm still here. I finished chemo in May. My recurrence was found in July. So I'm platinum resistant. I'm no longer curative, and I'm just living every day up to as much as I can do. Throughout this journey, though, support in all its forms has played this huge, huge role in my well-being, both physically and mentally, from start to finish and continuing. Support is paramount to recovery and continuance of our good health. And I'm just so proud and so pleased and so honored to speak with you all today on the various ways in which we can support ourselves as cancer warriors, and our caregivers too, because they need it as well as we do. So just to start off with all of this, I wanted to define the basic different types of support. And for a lot of you, this won't be news at all, but just so that we can kind of go along and understand, the quotes that come later. So first is emotional support. And honestly, for the cancer warrior, calming fears, showing empathy and compassion, encouraging people on difficult days, reminding me how far I've come. My husband often says, when I'm reminded I couldn't even make a whole dinner for my family once, and now I can batch cook a week's worth in an afternoon. Sometimes I'd forget something upstairs and I just wouldn't have the energy for a single flight of stairs. And now if I forget something at the bottom of the stairs, I can go back up. So reminding us that, I'm coming and healing every day, helping us to feel still here by sharing your experiences, just like Lindsay said. So the good and the bad, and providing a distraction from what we're going through with a funny story, with a picture, everything that Paula suggested too is really great. But also for the caregiver, we want to hold space for them to express their feelings. They're going through a deep grief and all of the accompanying emotions to the prospect of losing you, to losing us. They need comfort as well as we do. So if we can't provide that comfort, maybe we can find an outlet for them. There's often caregiver group therapies. Cancer centers offer those free of charge as well. There's also practical and tangible support. Because cancer has such an impact on the body's, physical ability to perform all tasks necessary to life, making meals, house cleaning, just being active. And often it affects our ability to work as well. So while many employers offer long-term disability, the government has some benefits. Honestly, as most of us will probably agree, none of it is ever really enough. So offering to help with practical and tangible support, such as making meals, covering a bill or an expense, that can be really useful, especially when additional expenses have come up, like hospital parking, prescriptions, comfort items to help with chemo and surgery. It can be really hard. So providing gift cards for meal companies, house cleaning, drugstores, super welcome, often appreciated. Offering to help with a bill or a comfort item. Often these things can be really hard for people to ask for. And even for folks in the audience that, times can be tough. If you're not financially able to provide those things, just call them up and offer to go and help with laundry or do dishes. Helping in some practical way can be really, really useful. Dropping off a meal, offering to drive to chemo. This helps both the cancer warrior and their caregivers because their caregivers have a little reducement in their burden as well. There's also physical support. So as a lot of us know, we can't do those physical tasks. It robs us of who we were body-wise, leaves us feeling powerless. There were days I couldn't even make it to the bathroom by myself, and I'm just really grateful to my husband for carrying me there, honestly. So for the cancer warrior, this type of support is twofold. So helping the warrior with the physical tasks they need, whilst helping them to preserve their dignity and independence whenever possible is really, really important. Reminding them that they're getting stronger every day after recovery, because it can take a really long time. You can finish chemo and a year later, you're still rebuilding your body, and that can leave you feeling deflated in so many ways. And then, of course, for the caregiver, just showing them physical affection and care, even on our days where we're able to. Hugs, holding hands, small gestures of physical comfort can go a long way for both of us. There's also informational support. So there's just so much information out there. And as we all know from the time that we were diagnosed, you're kind of on overload. And, during treatment and beyond, there's many, many resources out there, and we just find ourselves under a mountain of pages and things, and we're confused, and chemo brain and exhaustion can kind of set in and take over for those things. So providing informational support can be really, really helpful in taking the load off. So book suggestions, doctor information, recording prescription details. I know that my husband was in charge of my journal, so he wrote down every time I had a symptom and every medication that I took. And that became really handy. And it was a space off of my load too, that I didn't have to keep those records, and they were just kept for me. There's also peer support, which, cancer warriors often say that one of the most helpful and healing parts of their journey and their treatment experience was their peer support. And I can say 100% for me, that was the case. We all say this is a club nobody wanted to join. And as soon as we do, we're just blanketed in love and support from people who get it. We tried symptom, management tactics and ideas, and just commiserating together. And it's profoundly, powerful and validating. It can be really distracting too, just to listen to the stories of what someone else is going through and not be stuck in our own heads all the time. There's also spiritual support. So faith can be a big part of the process for many cancer warriors, providing comfort and hope and a sense of community. And of course, lastly, self-support. Making sure that you're practicing some self-care for yourself every day, whatever that may be to you, whatever that means to you. It's different for everyone, but do something for yourself every single day just to try and make sure that you can keep afloat. So then once you're aware of the different types of support, I always say take an inventory of your support, because you might actually be surprised. I think of it a bit as like a grocery basket or a luggage bag. You might need just a few essentials, but you might need at least one thing in every aisle. You never know. So you kind of take an inventory of where you're at, and then from there, try to seek out some solutions. As soon as we're diagnosed with cancer, I think many of us are inundated with just message after message after message. For me, the best offers were really clear. I can do this for you, where you can simply accept if you're comfortable. For me, the least helpful was, let me know if you need anything. To me, I mean, that just put the responsibility of not only identifying my needs to another person, but also in this situation where I was already vulnerable. I was exposed. My body was a shell of what it once was. My hair was gone. I didn't look the same. I didn't feel the same. I didn't want to ask for help, and I certainly didn't want to put a searchlight on what I felt like I needed. So that was really, really difficult. And what I did in preparation for this talk is I reached out to as many of my Teal sisters and cancer warrior that I have in my arsenal. I talked with 19 different women about their experience with caregiving and caregiving, and I wanted to share some insights with all of you today. And it was really eye-opening and amazing how much we have in common, but also how many things I was able to learn as well. So the first question I asked them what kinds of support was most useful to them. And resoundingly, 84% of them said emotional support. Other common supports expressed needed were peer supports with 74%, tangible and practical supports with 58%, and physical supports with 52%. And of course, every support has value. And I think that's really important to remember. So less needed, but still valuable supports were 37% informational and 16% spiritual. Sadly, when I asked if they had enough support through their experience, only 63% of my peers did. So as you can see there, honestly, there's still a really great need to jump in and help someone in your life who's affected by cancer. COVID restrictions, not being able to have their support person attend their appointments, or a lack of in-person support meetings left many of our Teal sisters feeling unsupported. Many did not find OCC until later in their treatment, and many more express the need for more emotional support. Because the supports are often found in larger cities, some sisters expressed that it was really difficult to obtain supports in a smaller town as well. It was also said and echoed that during the initial part of the experience, support was plentiful. People are everywhere. I mean, my mailbox was full every day for the first several months. But once treatment was done, the support dwindled and they still needed it. And I second that, because I don't, as we can all notice, it really does dwindle. Those who did get adequate support for themselves during their experience were both incredibly grateful and honestly had better outlooks during treatment and beyond. The next question I asked them was how they went about identifying the supports they needed, and what most commonly came from their cancer care counselor, actually, and advice from other cancer warriors in their lives. Other times, care needs had to reach a critical level before they asked for help directly. And some sisters even expressed they honestly didn't even know what they needed, but they felt unfulfilled. And when it came time to find the supports that they identified, actually, most of us just turned to online search. So Google, local and national cancer agencies, and OCC, Wellspring, Canadian Cancer Society also provided resources. Sisters most commonly used cancer care counselor or posters at their treatment location to help them connect. And some sisters suggested that the information for OCC and other supports should be in a package we got when meeting their oncologist the first time. And I agree, that would have been really, really helpful. Others got their support needs met with church groups before diagnosis that they were involved with, social media, cancer care nurses, peer groups and social workers, their oncologist, and their family doctor. When asked about the easiest ways to obtain the help needed, many sisters actually just said they were comfortable asking for the help. So a lot of them did it directly, some with social media updates or telling friends. And one Teal sister I spoke with suggested that you should identify people in your support network that were good for emotional support and identify people that were good for physical support or some other kind of support. She said that rarely people are good for more than one. So the most helpful offers came in a variety of ways, but most commonly, again, direct offers from caregivers. So I took some excerpts out of what the Teal sisters shared with me, and I wanted to share them with you as well. One Teal sister shared, I had a friend who would say that she was stopping at the grocery store and then would ask what kind of treat I wanted from there. a super direct offer, super great, doesn't leave a lot of pressure on us, and is really clear about what they're able to do. Another said, even just asking what foods I'm tolerating right now, offering to go on short walks or pick me up in their car and take me to sit in a park. No pressure, no expectations, just be kind. Another Teal sister said, I found it easier when people offered a tangible help. Example, can I drive you to treatment? I'd like you to bring you a meal. Does this day work for you? It was helpful for someone to start a meal train for me. If someone asked, I could forward the link. I could decide how to respond. I don't have a pet, but some might appreciate offers to walk or clean up after a dog, or pick up a few groceries when they get their own, or cleaning, laundry, or just come for a walk outside with me, or come over and watch a movie together, especially if someone lived alone. And another Teal sister shared, I did not feel up to a lot of company or phone calls, but receiving a card in the mail or a text to know my friends were thinking and praying for my recovery, dropping off some homemade soup or homemade anything was particularly welcomed by my partner. So as you can see, we really appreciate almost any kind of help and support that people can offer. We love when friends and family keep in touch regularly after major treatments, when people asked when it was a good time to call or have a video chat. No matter the support that we needed, it was really important to seek counseling, as many of the supports needed are invisible. There are huge mental and emotional issues that come with this diagnosis and treatment, and they're just as important as the very visible physical symptoms. Another sister reminded me that whilst we always feel that we have to stay strong for those around us, we can ask for help and still be strong. And I thought that was really brilliant and moving. The next question that I asked them what kinds of support were helpful during this time. And the most common response was unhelpful during this time. The most common response was unsolicited advice from those not affected by cancer. Please don't do this. The treatment journey is such a personal one. It's so important that the sister can wade through the decision-making process without feeling pushed or influenced by treatments that they may not be interested in. There is no miracle cure. So please, please, please keep it to yourself. Cancer sisters, we don't want your pity. We don't want your comments. We don't want your suggestions or miracle cures. Some sisters also suggested to me that need to be positive or have toxic positivity was not helpful to them. We have strong days. We have great days where we want to laugh and we want to be positive. And then we have other days where we're not so much. And we love to have that freedom to just be. And that's really great. Of course, I want to mention finances. They're often tricky during this time. And some sisters express that they had to navigate financial issues to be difficult. And I can confirm this is true. Like government paperwork and other kinds of paperwork are really they're a lot to take in because a cancer diagnosis can come with major financial implications. It would be helpful to have access to a fund without needing to change your financial level. These helps were only available to low-income people, but people in other income levels were not necessarily better off, and the threshold was too low that it became inaccessible to many people. So information about financial support would be one service that would be very useful if people can provide that as an informational support. Others stated that it was difficult sometimes to accept the physical or tangible help because they felt like they needed to be ready to visit, to chat, to spend time, when honestly, all we have the energy for is healing and resting. So the obligation that they felt to be good company prevented them from accepting the help. One Teal sister said, I found it hard what to say to, if you need anything, let me know. And I never called those people back since the offer was too broad. And that's true as well for me. Even while we're experiencing treatment, we still want to care for our own caregivers, and we want to feel that we are included and that we matter and we're still here. So I asked the Teal sisters how they found ways to care for their families and caregivers during this time. And most respondents chose to have their caregivers spend time without them and with their own family and friends instead as an outlet. Many of us also made sure that their caregiver received counseling to help with the emotional side. And one Teal sister mentioned that her partner took a caregiving course for 5 weeks to help with the effect of providing care and their experience. Some of them got small gifts of thanks, gave social media or verbal thank yous, took the time to remember important events going on for their caregivers, such as birthdays or appointments or other milestones. For those sisters with spouses, They took the time to ask how they were, to check in. Some ordered in food they liked or showed physical affection when able, planned small outings to favorite spots. Many spent time on their best days during treatment to cook dinners, treats, cleaning, helping to relieve the responsibilities of the caregiver. However, more than one Teal sister stated that they often felt like a failure for not being able to provide in the ways that they wanted to their children or partners. And so, as you can see, Paula, we also want to care for our own families and caregivers, and this is really important to us. We know the toll this illness takes on them too, and we want to be productive and useful. And caring for my family is such an important part of my life. And I'm just wondering if you have tips and suggestions on what we can do to be a better support to them too.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. I love that you have just incorporated all these other voices. And I think if we both ended up crying by the end of the session, we haven't done a good job. I guess, I mean, just briefly before my marks, I think that I didn't realize until I was preparing for the session, how much in fact Lindsay does care for me without actually articulating those things. But I have learned to have to care for myself. And everyone's like, oh, you have to take care of yourself. My family doctor is like, how are you doing? I'm okay. He's like, well, take care then. That was the end of it. Cut print, that was it. I'm like, okay, I'll figure that out, won't I? So I've kind of figured it out, sort of. This is how I figured it out. I'll share it with all of y'all. So in terms of caring myself, the phrase that runs through my head the most is the one from the movie Jaws. When the hero, when he sees the giant shark, he says, you're going to need a bigger boat. And that really reminds me, says, like, you might think you know sharks. You might think you know caregiving, because I thought I did. You might think that your spiritual, emotional boat is sturdy enough to weather any storm. But preparing, like even caregiving for my mom in the past and caregiving for my husband now did not and do not prepare me for supporting my sister, because she's different, because each of these cancer opportunities are different. So metaphorically and in real life, I have needed to be stronger, find different allies, use different tools, and constantly change strategies as Lindsay's journey has progressed. And I've needed a bigger boat. So what and who goes in the bigger boat? Well, let's start with the easy stuff. A whole lot of chocolate for sure. That's definitely doctor prescribed. Cat videos, we got those. My old yoga mat, a friend who calls me on my crap, an aunt who thinks I'm amazing even when I'm at my worst, and I can get worse. A really noisy country playlist, my hiking poles, a little quiet patch of forest, and that little back corner of my garden where even my neighbors can't see me cry, because you need a place to cry. Because sometimes crying in front of your Teal sister, they don't want to see it. They can't. They don't want to see you cry. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. So my bigger boat is also stocked, not just with stuff from the outside, but with new memories and new stories. I think I talked about these since cancer, these now stories, those Zoom interviews. They are a treasure. They are such a treasure to me. And pictures of so when Lindsay had her surgery, we filled her room with these buckets of Costco roses, and there's wonderful pictures of Lindsay. Another is a favorite picture of Lindsay when she lost her hair after she first had chemo, was at my house. And I tied a bandana around her head, because of course we didn't have anything else because it was Christmas time. And then we went to see a terrible movie. And I have this wonderful picture of her like lying back in this movie chair with this bandana. I love that picture. And it raises my boat, it fills my boat. But more broadly and more metaphorically, I need to make physical and mental space in my boat for a number of things. So space for actually new skills and new projects, new hobbies, new interests. And this is counterintuitive. You're like, I don't have time. I don't have time for this. I'm busy. But caregiving feels like contraction, or it does to me. It feels like dancing as fast as you can to ward off death. Like, it's like I've got this. People don't die on me. Please don't give me a plant. Like, don't give me a plant. I can't, just don't, I can't. And expansion or growth is healing. It is for me, and it serves as an antidote to those inevitable feelings of impotence, which I think every caregiver has had at some point in time. I've needed space in my boat for both humor and anger. And both of these are okay. It's okay to laugh and it's okay to be mad, even at your Teal sister. And these do not mitigate your dedication or your love as a caregiver. Lindsay is still allowed to drive me nuts, and I'm still allowed to say so. Oops. And I've needed space for both hope and fear, and certainty and panic, and the understanding that Lindsay and I are going to be at different spaces at different times, and this is going to feel out of tune for both of us. It just is, unfortunately. And I've needed space for grief, for anticipatory grief, grieving in advance. Even though, Lindsay hopes she's going to live 40 years, God willing she will, but I got nothing to do with that. I can't do anything about that. So, but there is grieving. We've talked about that, as well as mourning the death of my old self, because I've mourned the death of being a daughter. My role as a wife is changing, and my role as a sister is changing, kind of all in this very short time period for me. But I think that love and loss and bearing witness to pain, all this does and should leave scars. And I said to one caregiver once, this shit is hard, and it's okay that it's hard. So I've needed space in my boat to feel the feelings and to get used to the shape of my new emotional body. And it has some open wounds on it still, and it has some healed scars as well. And finally, space for the ebb and flow of power. So caregiving also often involves coming to a new place of power and responsibility. So Lindsay, particularly because the autism, relies on me a lot for medical advocacy and accompaniment, best that I can. But it's also a place of frank powerlessness. I have no control over Lindsay's cancer, like none. I'm going to need a whole arc for that sentence alone. But I can alleviate some of her suffering and also some of my own. Because I think suffering as a caregiver emerges primarily from forgetting. Suffering emerges from forgetting that she's still my sister in all her glory, goofiness, driving me bonkers, worrying me to death ways that she's always been. And if suffering emerges from forgetting, then caregiving or healing of a sort, even if we dare say that, can emerge from remembering, from letting Lindsay in, because I'm really bad at that. I don't let her in. From just texting her that tonight I'm grumpy, I'm overwhelmed, I'm eating chocolate, and I'm watching 90 Day Fiance, so don't judge. And having her text back, yeah, you have a lot on your plate. I mean, that's everything, but that's still possible. And that makes me feel like I might weather the storm and that I might guide her safely home. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for that. And yeah, I had tears and I had laughter, and I thank you so much for sharing all of that raw and emotional support needs and how to care for yourself and your loved ones. We talked about this before, and this is definitely a session that we knew we needed more time for. So good news is we are going to work on a longer session for our speaker series coming up in the new year with both Victoria and Paula. I just wanted to run through a couple of the comments that were left in the chat box. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it. There was, I love that storyteller as a caregiver and caregetter, such an important role. Any thoughts or any comments, I guess, Paula, on how do you go about starting that?
Thank you. I think it really depends on who your Teal sister is. This was a surprise to me. Lindsay can be, when she's done, she's very quiet. She can be kind of really monosyllabic. And my husband's like, you're going to get 2 words out of her. I'm like, I'm going to interview her. I put my anthropologist hat on. I'm going to interview Lindsay. And it took a lot of preparation. I didn't give her any questions in advance because I knew she'd want to write down the right answers. And I set it up for her, like for us, because we do this Sunday chat. We have breakfast together. We chat about like everything Sundays, important stuff, stupid stuff. And for her, I had to recreate that setting for her that was going to be comfortable as best as I could, even though it was on Zoom and she's not super comfortable with the technology. And we did a couple of dry runs of the technology as well. So it really depends on how your Teal sister, if you could do it in person, that's great. We also did it in smaller segments because it's a lot. I mean, it's a big journey. There's a lot of stuff. There's hard stuff, happy stuff, and allow it to happen organically if you can. And in, like I said, in the manner and the pace that she wishes, when she's ready, not necessarily when you're ready as well. And also don't write yourself out of the story is what I would say.
Thanks, Paula. And I guess just starting. Just do
start it. There's no right, wrong. I mean, do pictures, do pictograms, write colors, get some crayons out. You don't have to sit there and write up some, dissertation on the subject. It's your story as a Teal sister, and tell it to someone who you trust, or write it yourself if you are comfortable doing that as well.
Thank you. Victoria, I also just wanted to share with you, we had some other great advice and tips in the chat, and I wanted to share some of those as well. But I wanted to say, I loved the line when you said, you can ask for help and still be strong. That really resonated. I noticed in the chat as well. And I also just picked up on, I love that someone actually asked about your dietary needs, and it really made me think, when I'm being a support person, I got some great tips and advice as well. So some of the women had a laundry fairy. One lady had a laundry fairy for over a year. It was a wonderful gift. She came every 2 weeks. Tim Hortons drive-by. So they'd go to the Tim Hortons drive-through and then just stop by and drop it on the doorstep. Also, one thing I didn't know, but some hospitals sell parking passes, and those can be great gifts as well. Another laundry fairy, a neighbor showed up with 2 laundry baskets, unannounced, didn't tell. This lady said that was the best. A couple other ones here was a morning gift. Every morning they would wake up and it would be there, and it was just such a cheerful way for them to start the day. Anyway, we are a little bit over time, but I want to thank you both so much again for this real and emotional conversation. Some great practical advice and tips. And thank you again, and we'll look forward to the longer session come the new year.
Thank you so much for having us, Steph.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the evening.